Today's video is brought to you by ASRock and the killer DoubleShot Pro. In fact, that's the entire video. All we're going to do is talk about quality of service on the network and how important that is. And even if you don't have a killer DoubleShot Pro, you can learn something because quality of service is critically important. First, I'm going to show you how to set it up. Get the ASRock Z590 Taichi Core i9, got the Cooler Master Cryo Cooler in this. This system is built for literal insanity. It's got the killer DoubleShot Pro built right in, as do several different models of ASRock motherboard. You should check that out because there's definitely a lot of options there, depending on what you're looking for in terms of motherboard features, platform, whatever. You've got options. Check out those ASRock motherboards. But quality of service is something that's important to everybody, literally everybody, if you're into gaming while doing other things. And the killer DoubleShot Pro software gives you that control over your individual machine. But there's a lot more to the story, so let's do a deep dive. So the promise of the killer DoubleShot Pro software is to help you improve your latency. And there is a very intimate relationship between your latency and your bandwidth. As in, you start to run out of bandwidth and your latency will skyrocket. How this makes a difference with games and gaming has to do with lag. If your computer is doing a background transfer or, a bulk file download or whatever, it doesn't know to prioritize the game over the bulk transfer without software telling it to do that, or at least your router telling it to do it. Something has to decide this kind of traffic is more important than this other kind of traffic. And because of the way that the network is set up, if your computer starts uploading a lot of information, like say somebody uploads a presentation somewhere, or you finish your homework and it's like it's time to play a game, but your homework is going to take 10 or 15 minutes to upload to the class website so that your professor can look at it or whatever, you're going to have a bad time gaming during that 10 or 15 minutes, depending on your internet connection and some other parameters, because the traffic isn't prioritized. You realize that because you'll be playing the game and it'll be like rubber banding, the ping time gets worse, it's not a really good time in the game. If you notice that your ping time swings wildly, it's like, sometimes my ping time is really good, and then other times my ping time is really bad. Assuming that your internet connection isn't awful and that your ISP isn't just horrible, which, to be fair, in America, that's probably the case a lot of the time, a lot more than it should be, then it may be to do with those background transfers, and software like this might help you. All right, setting it up is super easy. The first thing that you want to do is go to the ASRock Taichi Z590 support page. Of course, if you have a different motherboard than that, you want to go to that motherboard support page. And you don't want to click support in the top right. That's general support. You want to click support farther down the page, which is specific to your motherboard. So in our case, we need the killer LAN driver, the killer Wi-Fi driver, and the killer control center. Once you get that set up, you can bring up the killer control center and just sort of take a look around. It gives you an overview page, and the overview shows you what's going on right now. What internet connections or network connections do you have that are turned on? What are active? What is actually transmitting information? What is it transmitting information to? A little graph of what the history has been. It tries to also categorize your traffic in terms of like, oh, this is a stream, you're watching Netflix, or oh, you're downloading a game from Steam, or oh, you're playing something. As long as the software is running, it's collecting stats on your local computer, so you can use the drop-down menus to pick, hey, is this happening at this particular time? Do I want to see the last day's stats? Is the last couple hours stats okay? You've got options. One of the most useful tabs in this software is the prioritization engine. This shows you all of the applications that are active and what they're doing on the network. This is pretty cool because you can actually see what's happening. I mean, if you wanted to do a deeper dive, you could use a piece of software like Glasswire or something like that, which is more aimed at firewall stuff than traffic prioritization stuff, but it is nice to have transparency into exactly what application is doing what on your network. And that's sort of key when we do the deep dive about the how and the why. This is the how, the why is later. We'll talk a little bit more about how all this works, because your computer is not the only component of this equation, and in order for you to have a good experience here, you need to sort of understand all the moving pieces. Fortunately, Intel and Killer have partnered up on this, so there's the intelligent engine, and the intelligent engine makes it to where that you don't have to be a network engineer in order to figure this out. It's going to make some pretty baseline recommendations and say, hey, you should do this, you should consider this, let's turn this on, turn this off, and pretty much you can just go with whatever it recommends. For optimal network performance, please set the bandwidth limits. How do you know what the bandwidth limits are? Well, that's going to be the rest of this video, but let's keep walking through the software because the setup is pretty easy. Your computer is capable of a faster link, 2.5 gigabit, versus the 1 gigabit switch that I have it plugged into right now. This is usually pretty good advice. The place where this falls short is that most people's internet connection is not 1 gigabit. Like, I would say that 1 gigabit is generally the fastest connection that you can get in America. Some places, yes, you can get greater than 1 gigabit. Google's rolled out 2 gigabit in a few places. But again, Google's the unicorn. There are a few places you can get 10 gigabit. For a home user, it doesn't matter. And actually, if your internet connection is that fast, this software is not quite as beneficial to you. In the explanation section, we'll sort of learn how when you've got a slower internet connection, like say 100 megabit, there are people in the audience that are like, 100 megabit would be fast for me. I've only got 6. Yeah, I know. I feel your pain. I'm from there too, and it's horribly painful. But this software, this prioritization software, can actually be more useful to you if you have a crappier internet connection than a better internet connection, because there's less room for mistakes. You got to do more spinning plate juggling to keep your latency low when you're really bandwidth constrained. That's what those bandwidth limits are about. There's also a Wi-Fi signal strength analyzer. Did you get the connection for the antenna plugged in all the way? Did you get it screwed down nice and tight? Why is the signal strength so low when it's sitting right next to the access point? What other access points in the area are overlapping this? Look, the Wi-Fi spectrum is really crowded. It's not just Wi-Fi internet access that's happening in the 2.4 gigahertz band. There's a lot of stuff happening in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Your Wi-Fi is pretty good, but is it actually good enough to use in conjunction with your wired connection? Is that even an option? Then there's a GameFast tab. GameFast tab is a set of preset optimizations for a whole bunch of games. So this is again a feature that'll let you sort of set it and forget it. You turn this on and these games are automatically going to get priority. But in order for this to work right, you still have to set those bandwidth limits overall. Turning on Killer DoubleShot Pro is pretty easy. You just toggle it on in the settings here once your connection is connected to the Wi-Fi. If it's grayed out, it doesn't think that you're connected to the Wi-Fi or you don't have the right killer drivers installed. So go download the drivers from the website. It'll light up, you toggle it on, you're good to go. Now here's the neat trick. If you have a hotspot off of your phone, like a 4G or a 5G data plan, and you don't have metered data because you'll burn through your data pretty quickly, you can actually use 2 different internet connections with the DoubleShot Pro because it's sort of figuring out which thing goes where. And that actually could be really awesome because you're using sort of 2 different internet connections on one computer. So your game traffic can get maximum priority and it'll figure out which one that is, and then it keeps the traffic there versus, say your bulk traffic like BitTorrent or anything else. Most people are not in that position though. Most people are just going to connect the wireless connection and the wired connection to the same network. Now here's the place where you could run into trouble, is your internet connection is always pretty much going to be less bandwidth than you have available. The software here was saying, oh, you need to connect to 2.5 gigabit. You could upgrade your router and do some other stuff. You don't have a 2.5 gigabit internet connection though. Sure, it can be great if you have a NAS or something like that on your network that you can transfer information to and it's faster. But if you don't, then you're not really getting anything out of it for the internet side of it. And the main point of this software is to improve your latency to games and stuff like that out on the internet. So if you can't set up a hotspot or connect to like the building Wi-Fi or whatever, and that's a secondary internet connection versus your primary wired internet connection, it doesn't really benefit you as much to have both connections on at the same time, as much as it benefits you to use the software with the bandwidth shaping and other stuff like that to basically prioritize games ahead of any other bulk traffic that may be happening on your individual machine. But it can get a little complicated because there's probably also other machines on your home network. Let's go to the whiteboard. So this is your router modem combo, and this is your crappy ISP. Your crappy ISP really, they're just so crappy. Let's not talk about that. Let's assume that you've got the 1 gigabit connection here. But the thing to know is it 1 gigabit slash something else? 1 gigabit slash a smaller number. A lot of providers, especially cable providers, it's an asymmetric connection. You might have 500 megabit or 1 gigabit, but your upload might only be 20 megabit. I've got news for you. If you're downloading at 1 gigabit, your computer has to send acknowledgments back that you're downloading a file that whatever was sending to you made it. And at a gigabit, if you're downloading it that fast, the acknowledgements are going to saturate almost all of your upload, meaning that you don't have time to actually upload a document. You have to actually upload the acknowledgements, which consume most of your upload. So you can't upload a file and download at full speed at the same time. It's sort of fun, isn't it? So it's always good to prioritize those acknowledgements, and this kind of software does that. A lot of the time a router modem combo will prioritize those acknowledgements as well from devices that are on your network. But if your connection is slower, it can be a little more complicated, and we'll get to that. So you get your router modem combo. Let's get some wired ports, and there's also wireless here. You know, your connection could be up to 2.5 gigabit to your router modem, and you'd also have a 2.4 gigabit connection effectively for the best Wi-Fi connection ever. Now, most of the time it's not actually going to be that fast. I'd say a typical connection is probably on the order of about 800 megabit, 700 megabit, 500 megabit. That's pretty typical for wireless coverage unless you're really, really close to the wireless router or you spend a bunch of money on your router or wireless access point. That's really just kind of a long-winded way of saying that your connection to your router is way faster than your internet connection, like I was saying. And the bottleneck really is here. It's not on your computer most of the time. So when you think about using software like the killer DoubleShot Pro, you got to think in terms of what's your internet connection like. Let's say you've got a 100/5. That's far more common in America. 100 megabit down, 5 megabit upload. So what happens if you set your bandwidth limits on your connection here to 100/5? It'll work great, or 100/4.95. You know, it'll work great because your computer won't saturate that connection until somebody else, your younger sibling, they're also connecting, probably way less than 2.5 gig. They're probably on wireless, and they're going to play Roblox because Roblox. I mean, isn't that just the thing? So they start playing, and then now all of a sudden, the assumptions that you've made about what your bandwidth limit should be, those assumptions are no longer correct because you're both competing for a connection from that single ISP. Now remember, it's different if your wireless connection on the Killer DoubleShot Pro is going through a different ISP or a different internet connection tethered through your phone, something like that. That's something else altogether. In this scenario, what's actually best is if you do traffic shaping, it's really what that's called, quality of service sometimes, on your sibling's computer to limit their upload. Upload's usually the thing that you want to limit, and maybe 1 megabit. And then sort of you know that you've got 4 megabit left for yourself, so worst case scenario, they're only using a megabit. You could be using up to 4 megabit. You can dial that in the Killer DoubleShot Pro software, and that'll keep your ping time in check as long as your ISP really does actually have that much bandwidth available. Again, with cable providers, they sort of fudge sometimes. Everybody gets home from school at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and these numbers may go way down. Run a speed test at different times during the day. See what your speed test is. One thing I like about speed tests is when you run a speed test, if the numbers are less than what you pay, it doesn't matter whose problem that is. It's just that it's a problem. And it could be that your ISP is overloaded. It could be that other people on your internet connection are using bandwidth. And so the speed test doesn't test as good as it possibly could. So either way, the speed test will give you some numbers for what you can put into your bandwidth. Now you might be thinking, on the router modem, wouldn't it be better if I did traffic shaping at the router modem level as opposed to the application level? And that's true to an extent. The place where that falls apart is individual applications. So the router modem can see the IP address and the destination port, and it can sort of infer some things. It's like, oh, they're trying to get to a web page. Oh, they're trying to use the BitTorrent client. Oh, they're trying to use a VPN. Because the destination ports will change. The router doesn't really keep a list of IP addresses to classify services that way, but it is another way that traffic can be classified depending on how fancy you want to get with the rules. But your computer, doing the traffic shaping, can see the individual applications. If you're using the web client for Discord, your router can't distinguish between that and, say, HTTPS traffic to Windows Update. So it can be a little problematic for the router to make all of the quality of service decisions, but a good router can make certain quality of service decisions, like those acknowledgements always get priority over everything else, or this connection is using a lot of bandwidth, maybe we should sort of downrate it, that kind of thing. The Killer DoubleShot Pro software won't help you if the rest of your network is crappy and you're having problems, or the rest of your network struggles with not enough bandwidth. But this is where the Killer DoubleShot Pro software can really help you when you're in this sort of really bandwidth constrained scenario. You can sort of shut all the devices off on your network, use your computer, do some baseline testing, figure out what you're working with in terms of your internet bandwidth. If your internet bandwidth is fluctuating with your ISP, maybe that's a call to their tech support, something like that. But, just sort of keep that in mind as you work through these kinds of things. It is potentially nice having the ability to have your computer connected to 2 different internet connections at the same time, like say an ephemeral connection through your phone or a Wi-Fi hotspot or the building hotspot, and then also a wired connection through an ISP that hopefully you pay for so that they'll give you tech support and make it better. So with the killer DoubleShot Pro software, don't be afraid to experiment. Set your bandwidth limit well below what your bandwidth limits are for your actual internet connection. Generally, setting limits on your upload is more important than your download. It depends on the type of connection you have and some other parameters, but a lot of cable ISPs will throttle your download when your upload reaches a certain point. And this is just kind of a mechanism more to do with buffer bloat and a mismechanism, a misfeature, a deliberate misfeature in the way that the network is architected versus, an actual conscious deliberate decision that the ISP has made. But you always want to preserve your upload. You never want your upload connection, at least on most American connections, to be saturated. The far end will worry about saturating your download part of your internet connection, but the upload part is really what you got to keep an eye on. And if you want the best quality of service, you really want to manage your upload. So depending on how much stuff you have going on your network, you could set your bandwidth limit for your upload, especially when you're gaming, well below whatever your maximum is. So if you have, a 5 megabit upload, which unfortunately a lot of people in America, that's like the best they can get, then, it wouldn't be unreasonable to set like 2 or 2.5 megabit upload. Even if you speed test the full 5 megabit, setting it for like 2 or 2.5 megabit for the best gaming experience, it'll be a little bit more survivable when other people on your network are doing stuff. Because remember, this software really only works on your computer. It doesn't affect any of the other computers on the rest of your network. And sure, you could install a gaming grade router that has better quality of service and better features like this, but at the router level, the router can't really see individual applications. It can only see network destinations and ports. So it can make a guess about how to prioritize the traffic, but it's not quite as good as being able to see the actual applications that are using network traffic the way that the software does on your PC. And to be sure, there's other software that does similar stuff as to what you see with the killer DoubleShot Pro. But if you have that feature on your motherboard, why not take advantage of it? And now hopefully you understand a little bit more about quality of service and how the networking stuff works. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. I'm signing out, and you can find me in the Level 1 forums if you have any questions, or if I got something horribly, horribly wrong. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.